Good evening, everyone. Glad you are here again. My name is Rustin. I'm one of the ministers here at Wayzata Community Church, and I oversee faith formation. And part of that is this interfaith lecture that we do every year at this time in the month of June. And we're really excited that you're here. Make yourself at home. Keep coming on in. But before we start tonight, we have a new interfaith group here at the church that is engaging in all kinds of interfaith discussions and opportunities. And the chair of that group is Marcus. And I'm going to invite Marcus up to come tell you about a few things that are coming in the upcoming moments.
Sure. Thanks, Rustin.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Busho. Welcome again. So the Interfaith Engagement Ministries, our mission is really just to provide opportunities to worship, to celebrate, to get to know people from other faith traditions. It could be educational things, it could be social activities, it could be field trips. And this summer, in fact, this Sunday, we're having a field trip down to the very large Cambodian Buddhist temple and monastery in Dakota County. I've not been there yet. My colleague has. I don't know if Jan is here yet, Nan Peterson. So if you're interested in coming, we're asking for $10 that will be go towards an honorarium for the monks that will be guiding us through the temple and speaking to us, answering questions. And they specifically have asked that people come with questions for them to answer. We're going to be meeting in the parking lot Sunday afternoon. We're going to leave at 1 p.m. So if you're there maybe quarter till or so, we're not going to have provided transportation. There weren't enough people that were interested in that. So we're going to carpool. If you're able to come and perhaps carry a few others in your car, that would be great. If not, we'll certainly find a way to get everybody there. If you have any questions, our Interfaith Engagement Ministry cards are over in the little table there, or come and speak to me, and we can make sure that you get all the information. There is information online, and there's a registration form there with a link that talks about the various activities this summer. And we really encourage you. This is quite a place, and in fact, it's the largest Cambodian temple and monastery in the United States, I understand. And at least the pictures online look really good, so it'll be an opportunity. Yes?
What time do you return?
We'll be back at 4 o'clock. So we're planning on spending about 2 hours there, which seemed about right, and speaking to our hosts, and then plan on an hour to get back. So from 1 to 4, if you have the time, we'd love to have you, and I think this will be really a wonderful experience. And stay tuned for other things that are going on with our ministry.
Thank you, Marcus. As he says, we're meeting in the lot, the parking lot. This is a very big parking lot. So when he says parking lot, he means the west lot.
Yes.
Right out here on this side. It's the smaller lot, west lot, 1 o'clock. We'll return to that same lot at 4 o'clock. We would love for you to join us. So without further ado, I would like to reintroduce Busho Lan, who is a Zen Buddhist priest and has last week offered us some really beautiful words and knowledge about Buddhism. And we have those notes. Also, if you would like to see and hear the lecture from last week, tomorrow morning it'll go live on the media section on our new webpage. So you just click media, and it'll take you right to that video. It's already on the church's YouTube page that you can go ahead and get it now if you want from YouTube, but it'll be posted live to our website as well, so you can catch up with that. But tonight he's going to talk specifically about Zen Buddhism and its practice here in Minnesota. And then next week, we'll finish out our lecture series with Susan Stabile, who is a Buddhist and Christian who has written a book on how Buddhism and the practices of Buddhism have formed and engaged her Catholic faith as well. So join us next week for Susan Stabile, but without further ado, Busho.
Wonderful.
And I'm going to bring,
Thank you.
I'm going to bring the notes in just 1 second. They're off the printer right now.
Hi, everyone. I'm back. That makes all of you repeat offenders, I think. Just so I know how much time to spend on a quick overview of last week's material, maybe it'd be easier to do it this way. How many folks in the room were not here last week who are brand new to this? About half. Okay, cool. it'll be worth spending some time on that. So hi, my name is Busho Lan. I'm one of the, I'm one of the priests at the Minnesota Zen Meditation Center. If you are familiar with Minneapolis, and especially if you are a lake runner, or a lake walker, or a lake biker, or a lake rollerblader, and you do the chain of lakes, you've probably ridden or driven or run or jogged past the big white house on the east shore of what was Lake Calhoun and is now Bde-Maka. Minnesota Zen Meditation Center has been in that building and in existence for about 45 years now, which, as I said last week, makes us one of the oldest Buddhist temples in the country. So that's less about tooting our horn and how awesome we are, and more about telling you we are new. Buddhism is new in this country. So the thing that faith does when it meets culture, and the thing that culture does when it meets faith, is something that we're actually watching happen right now in real time. What I mean by that is 500 years from now, somebody says, hey, what does American Buddhism look like? We'll probably have somewhat of an answer, and right now we don't. Does that make sense? It's too new. We don't know what to do with it yet. And I think that's really exciting. So in my head, that makes this the Wild West. Like, right, we're right on the frontier, and each Zen center and each Buddhist community is like a lawless Western town with its own sheriff trying to hold this thing together, right? And some of you probably remember during the 50s and during the 60s, that first kind of wave of Eastern teachers came to our country from the Hindu tradition, from the yogic tradition, from the Buddhist tradition, from Tibetan Buddhism, from Chinese Zen, Japanese Zen, Korean Zen, right? At the end of the Beat movement, kind of the beginning of the hippie movement, there was this wave of Eastern teachers. So what we're beginning to do now is we're in our second generation, depending on how you count it, of folks who are born and raised in this country, practicing a faith that essentially up till now has been very much shaped culturally by parts of the world that we oftentimes haven't even visited. Wildly different cultures, right? So one of the things that's happening right now in the West, that's happening especially here in Minnesota, because we're a hotbed, you guys, for Buddhism. Did you know that? There's over a dozen Dharma centers, a dozen Buddhist centers in the Twin Cities alone, not including the state at large. Wow. I don't know why. We really are. There's a lot of Buddhism here. There's Theravadan Buddhism, there's Zen Buddhism, there is Mahayana, there is Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism, there's Vipassana Buddhism. Wow, all in the Twin Cities. So one of the things that's happening is we're trying to, as Midwestern Minnesotans, figure out we have been given this immensely beautiful, immensely powerful thing called a faith tradition by our teachers a couple of generations ago, who were born and raised and practiced in cultures completely unlike ours. And we want to honor the gift that they gave us, but at the same time acknowledge the world in which we are living, not only because it's 2019, but also that this is Minnesota. Some of those things they taught us really work well, and some of them don't. So we're actually in the process, all of us in this country, Buddhists in this country, are either actively or passively making decisions about what we hang on to and what the tradition is and what we let go of and what is like a cultural trapping. Does that make sense? To give you an example, when you come to MZMC, which I hope you do, come. We get visitors all the time. If you come, you'll see people just like you. So that'll either be a letdown or reassuring, depending on what you're looking for. It's up to you. But you'll just be like, oh, there's a bunch of Midwesterners hanging out in folding chairs making this up. Okay, cool. But you'll come to Zen Center and they'll say, hey, welcome. It's good to see you. If you'd be kind enough, could you please put your shoes there in the rack? We'll have you take your shoes off. So the Buddha never gave an anti-shoe sermon. There is no anti-footwear teachings anywhere in the faith tradition. We have you take your shoes off because our founder was Japanese. That's what he was used to. He was born and raised in Japan, Katagiri Roshi. He's used to taking off his shoes when he comes in the building. This is Minnesota, so about 6 months of the year that seems to work well anyway. So we've hung on to it. So that's a small example, right? But we had to at some point make a decision. We should probably chant in English. Can we do that? We'll have you take your shoes off. I think we'll hang on to that one. But we need to remember, this isn't a Buddhist thing we're hanging on to. This is a Japanese thing we're hanging on to. Because do you see how that sort of thing can get, right? So I'm starting with this just because if you were to have 5 consecutive evenings here from 5 consecutive Buddhist teachers in 5 different areas of the country, you get very different interpretations of not only what Western Zen is, Western Buddhism is, but depending on how their teacher and their centers adhere to the tradition, you'd get quite a spectrum. You'd get quite a, oh yes, we still chant in Sanskrit, of course. The scriptures were written in, yes, of course we still do that, of course. And others be like, no man, what are you talking about? We meditate in chairs, we don't, right? And the reason this is relevant in our tradition is because there is no Vatican. I was raised Catholic, right? So, when you go to, I think I said this last week, if you go to Mass in Eden Prairie and you go to Mass in Wayzata, you go to the same Mass. It's McDonald's. You know you're going to get the same thing. It's part of their quality control, right? So that way, when the Father says, and peace be with you, you know to say, and also with you. I'm sorry, now it's, and also with your spirit. They changed it. But the Vatican decided to change it, right? So when they make that decision, everybody all over the world makes the change at the same time. Does this make sense? This is what we call doctrine-based or faith, doctrine-based or dogma-based faith. If the Lutherans have a new rule, then all the Lutherans, right? If the Catholics have a new, then all the... So there is no equivalent to that in the Buddhist tradition at all, which means every temple, every teacher are their own thing. That isn't to say there are no rules. And I am speaking, please remember, on behalf of the United States. But at my temple, the guiding teacher is the guiding teacher, full stop. And so if we decide, yeah, shoes on, shoes on. If we decide shoes off, shoes off. But that guiding teacher does not have to answer to any. Does that make sense? Because as I alluded to last week, the tradition has been passed down hand to hand, from heart to heart, for 2,500 years. And it isn't to say there aren't Buddhist institutions, because there are. But right now in this country, we're at that forward wave of the spreading. This really is the Wild West. And so right now we're still kind of making it up as we go. And I actually think that's dynamic and fantastic, because it hasn't been locked in yet. And it's forcing us as American Buddhists to ask questions like, is this Dharma? Like, is this part of the tradition? Are we supposed to be taking off our shoes? Is there some sort of deal there? Or not? And we're supposed to ask ourselves questions like, should we be chanting in Japanese? Does that have some sort of, does that make sense? So we get to revisit all of these things and make conscious decisions about them. And I think that makes this really, really an exciting time to be a Western Buddhist. So, is that helpful? Okay, I don't want to jump into the deep end right away here, but I just wanted to kind of conceptualize and contextualize what it is we're talking about. Okay, so so you guys who were here last week, remember, I don't know anything about PowerPoint, right? You saw my first PowerPoint presentation. I'm excited to say I have introduced pictures. Remember last week I told you, don't use a template and use plenty of pictures, and I went, oh no, I have a template and it's only words. And my sister said, oh, they're gonna hate you. So I said, well, I'll do it this time. So this time, see, this is Zen and this is Minnesota. See the picture I found? So, Zen in Minnesota. Oh dear. I'll spend as little time on this as I can, because I know half of you in the room know this. The reason this is important is because if you're going to really go into depth about understanding where Christianity comes from, you have to understand Judaism to some degree, right? Because it springs from it. Zen springs from Buddhism, and Buddhism springs from essentially a proto-Hindu culture, so kind of understanding that evolution is somewhat important. So Buddhism itself, this is the origin of Buddhism. This is pre-Zen. We're about 1,000 years before the invention of Zen. 500 BC, northern India, we have a faith tradition that has many, many expressions all over the world, some very academic, some very devotional, some focus on interior power, changing consciousness through meditation, some focus on exterior power, and Buddha is much closer to what we would think of as like a savior kind of figure. The teaching for its time and its culture was outrageously radical. Really, really radical, for political reasons, for social reasons, for theological reasons, cosmological reasons. Modern psychologists right now are still looking at this stuff written 2,500 years ago going, no idea how you figured that out. You should not possibly have been able to notice those subtle flutterings of consciousness. But you get a bunch of people to sit still long enough, and they start to notice stuff, right? So we're just beginning in the West to unpack kind of the wisdom treasure chest, right? So the life story of the Buddha is, as I said it last week, I always think of it as kind of the reverse of the Jesus story. Instead of being born in a manger with nothing and becoming the king, he's born as royalty and he renounces all of it in order to become the king. Does that make sense? He leaves his life of palace, he leaves his life of his wife, he leaves his child, he leaves his inheritance, he leaves his name, he leaves everything. He shaves his head, which is a way of renouncing his personhood in that culture. More than his inheritance, that's really his person, really his personhood. It's hard for me as a 21st century American to understand how deep the caste system actually went in that country at that time. It's almost inconceivable to me that the untouchables were literally untouchable. You couldn't allow your shadow, for example, to cross the path of a Brahmin or you'd be killed. Holy cow, right? Holy cow. Pretty dark. He becomes that. If I'm going to teach about suffering, I have to understand suffering. So the way he taught that path at the beginning, again, like I was saying last week, was a no-kidding path. Extremely hardcore, highly ascetic. He defined it as the middle way between the extremes of asceticism and indulgence. But the path that he laid out, and all the rules for the nuns and all the rules for the monks described a life that most of us would think of was extraordinarily strict, seriously strict, right? And it's because the path was viewed as so demanding. If you really want to transform all of the suffering in your heart, you can't do anything else. It's going to take that much time. Which means, no, you don't get to do it on the weekends for an hour or two and be married and have a job and da-da-da-da-da. No, this is going to take your entire life. You're either in or out. Very, 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 very extreme. Beautiful. Can you imagine the depth of the commitment, right? But he transforms his own suffering. He wakes up. He teaches a path of awakening for others. He is very, very clear that it is available to others. It is available to men and to women, which again, at that time was outrageous. It is available to people in all 5 of the class, including the untouchables, which again was a political statement for that time. Whether he intended it to be or not, I don't know. They were always trying to kill him. Kind of like Jesus, you're going to get killed for teaching this kind of stuff. And it all came back to the core of the teaching of all of the different traditions, go back to the Four Noble Truths. And this is, as we talked about last time, one of the ways we can approach it as 21st century Americans is the diagnostic model that we still use in medicine of diagnosis, cause, prognosis, and cure. We all suffer from something we call suffering. There's our diagnosis. It is caused by grasping, desire, attachment, wanting things to be different than they are. It hurts when we do that. The prognosis, very positive. Oh, you can do something about that. That's in your mind, sweetheart. It's not outside of you. Can you imagine the power? You can actually, that's very, very powerful invitation. Transform your experience. And then finally, the 4th noble truth is the recipe, the cream you put on your itch, the prescription you take. And this is called the Eightfold Path of understanding the creation of suffering, the ethical components of how our interconnectedness with one another affects the state of our own heart. This is kind of the common sense stuff, but sort of like when I'm really mean to Marcus, I hurt me. I also hurt him. It doesn't work. Does that make sense? So they're like talk in a way that creates peace. Make a living, have a lifestyle that helps create peace. Do actions in the world that help create peace and not affliction, right? And then the final 3 steps of that Eightfold Path, of our prescription, of our medical model here, those final 3 deal with the mind. Effort, mindfulness, and concentration all deal with the mind. I'm saying that because I'm going to come back to it in a few minutes. This is where Zen spends all of its time. Well, not all, but most. The mind steps, right? So again, from last week, Buddhism posits that suffering comes from here, not from here. Right? Does that make sense? If my happiness as a speaker is dependent on all of you making good eye contact and taking notes and looking at me with a smile, you own my contentment. I don't. Do you get how I just gave my power away there? If you all fall asleep, I get a choice to say, wow, I must have really been relaxing. I put them at ease. I could tell how they trusted me. They fell asleep right in front of me. Isn't that sweet? Or I could choose a narrative of, what a bunch up, right? Or, oh, I could choose a narrative like, what's wrong with me? Why am I so bad at this? Dad was right. You feel it? I hope you do, because you know all three of those things, right? This is what we do. That is one of the radical core offerings of Buddhism. Oh, it's right here. And when you realize that, you get to make choice, and it's powerful. And it's beautiful, because I can transform my experience. Wow, right? So there's our core, Four Noble Truths. People go back and forth about this final statement. I leave it up here because I like it. Some would argue with it, some wouldn't. But what I said last time is Buddhism has been described as an orthopraxy, as opposed to an orthodoxy. These are unnecessarily large words that mean practice-based tradition versus words or belief-based tradition. Orthopraxy, practice, experience, right? Orthodoxy, what you read, what you believe, right? People of the book, people of the belief versus people of the practice. I'm really painting with a broad brush, but that's the core of it. And so when I'm asked when I do interfaith stuff, oh, what do Buddhists believe about blah, blah, I always go, oh, man, I don't know. Because we don't have a you're a Buddhist if you believe blank, and you're out if you don't. It doesn't go back to that. It goes back to, how do you feel? How do you feel right now? What is that about? What does your awareness tell you about what it is to be consciousness in form? You're a drop of spirit, and now you have matter. You've got bones, you've got muscles, you've got a beating heart. How is that? You're awake. Your awakeness, how is that? Does that make sense? There's your connection to the absolute. There's your connection to life. There's your connection to all of your suffering, all of your joy, all of your pain. How does it feel right now? Can you go in? Can you find it? What you believe about those things is secondary entirely. Right? Belief is one of the things we love to do. It's not bad at all. Not bad at all. But what's one of the things we tend to go to when we are in pain and confused. And then we go out instead of going in. I've forgotten who I am, and so I need this to tell me what this is. And again, sometimes that's very, very helpful. In Zen, we say you fall back on the precepts when you lose the spirit of the precepts. Does that make sense? We have precepts the way like commandments, like the Ten Commandments. Sort of when you've lost the spirit of the Ten Commandments, they're all love. That's all love. Acting and being in a way that's in accord with the law of love, sweetie. It's all about love. And when you lose that and you get confused about it, you go, oh man, I'm really triggered. What do I do right now? We've written some things down for you that'll really help kind of keep your ship upright, right? Start by not killing anybody. Start by not hitting anybody. Start by saying something that's helpful. Does that make sense? We fall back on it, but you can kind of see how those would be really, really helpful for me when I'm confused. But if I'm not confused, I don't need them. I don't need them because I have them. Does that kind of make sense, or was that too trippy? Okay. If you ask a relatively new mom, she's got a 3-month-old, let's say, what she's doing at 3 a.m. when she's halfway down the hallway holding a bottle in her hand and she's not even awake yet? Are you following the rules of being a good mother? She would think about it afterwards and go, yeah, I guess. But it bypasses this entirely. She doesn't have to go, oh, I hear the baby. What does a good mom do? Pull out the guidebook. Oh, rule number 3, when crying, even at 3 a.m, warm bottle, approach baby. Does that make sense? You would only need to be reminded of that if you forgot. So the onus of transformation, the onus of love, the onus of compassion and wisdom in this tradition, in Buddhism, is you. We do get guidance, and we do need example, and we do have stories, and we do have all that kind of stuff. It's helpful for us. But it's always, always, always in Zen offered as, if you get confused, use this. But it's like a life raft. You're not going to get in and go boating on a life raft. You're only going to pull that thing out if your boat's going down. Right? Because it's you. So, that's the core. That's kind of the core of what we're doing here. We're going to fast forward to about we just went 1,000 years. I'll do it again. 500 BC, 500 AD. There's a lot of power up here, you guys. I'll again spend as little time on this as I can. Buddhism, northern India, it spreads like all faith traditions of that time do, usually around trade routes. So it spreads along the Silk Road. Some of you know what the Silk Road is? So it goes up out of India. It actually goes into Nepal. And it goes into Tibet. And you guys know, you've heard of Tibetan Buddhism, I assume? Yeah. Everybody's heard of the Dalai Lama, right? He's one of the big, most visibly kind of rock starish figures in all of contemporary Buddhism. Tibet is incredibly difficult to get to. And when it's 500 BC, you don't get to fly in and out. So if you want to go to Tibet, it's going to take a few years of your life, literally, because it's surrounded by mountains. So that the form of Buddhism that forms there, when it meets the indigenous Tibetan, what would we say, native faith there, is very unique to that region, because it's isolated. So Buddhism went in and they went, yeah, we'll take some of that. That's pretty cool. We're going to mix it with the thing we already got. And it's got a very unique flavor and a very unique cosmology. It's incredibly advanced spirituality. It's fantastic stuff. But because that nation is landlocked, essentially, and very hard to get to, it's very unique, and it kind of creates itself there, right? But the rest of the Silk Road heads us into China. And so Buddhism moves into China, nobody knows, a couple hundred years after the Buddha dies, probably, before the time of Christ, probably. By the time 500 AD shows up, Buddhism knows what it is. It is an established faith, and the folks who practice it with great devotion are the folks that I mentioned earlier. These are hardcore folks, and they're following the rules. They're memorizing the scriptures. They're organizing themselves 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, the way the Vinaya, the code, dictates that they should. It's beautiful. And it's also starting to get institutionalized. And it's starting to feel like a bunch of rules. And some folks thrive in that kind of atmosphere, and some folks don't. But we have to understand that at the core of this tradition, just like the core of, I would argue, any faith tradition, is an experience. An experience, as helpful as it is for us to try to capture it in language and in metaphor and in simile and in, right? And as important as it is for us to try to relay experience through words and language and symbol and pictures and plays and movies, the experience itself is by definition impossible to recreate or express. We know this. If you had a friend who somehow had never tasted orange juice, they've never had it. They've never had it. And they'd say, hey, orange juice, that thing you drink every morning, what does that taste like? How do you get words to go there? I mean, you do your best, right? I don't know, it's like drinking the sun, I don't know. It's hot? No, it's cold, it's orangey. Oh yeah, that's not gonna work, you haven't tasted that. It's sort of sharp and kind of sweet, but sort of back of the throaty, and they're going, you're not helping me at all right now. I love that you're trying, but I have no idea what happens inside of your mouth when you drink orange juice. Experience, as precious as it is fleeting and impermanent, and it's incredibly vivid, So even later on tonight, when somebody says, hey, did you stick after and listen to that weird Buddhist guy? And you'd be like, yeah, I listened to the weird Buddhist guy. What did he say? Well, I don't know, he said a bunch of stuff about how you can't transmit an experience. I don't know, how did you feel when you were listening to him? I don't know. You can tell him you have my permission to say it's impossible to express, right? So we do it anyway, but by the time this guy comes around, the rascal behind me, the perception is that this has become institutionalized and dead. And the core of it has died. And the core of it is an experience of being awake. I'm doing that and you're hearing it. You're not choosing to hear it. You don't have ideas about it until you think about it later, but the point is, you are consciousness. Something's happening. You are consciousness. Something's happening. And everything we write down about it, and all the ideas we have about it, are wonderful. But they're also after, and they're also by definition going to fall short of the mark. Does that make sense? Wow, isn't that wild? So, what we have is, and this is clearly going to be, and I think I mentioned this last week, from a Zen perspective, the historical veracity of these things is irrelevant. Almost certainly most of the stuff is made up. So we have a poem that marks the beginning of Zen's movement from China to Japan. If you are a religion scholar, I'm running low on time here. If you're a religion scholar, I think it is fair to say Zen Buddhism is half Buddhism. I think it is fair to say the other half is Taoism. So if you don't know anything about Taoism, for tonight, don't worry about it. But do go home and Google the Tao Te Ching. Some of you know the Tao Te Ching. It's written about the same time as the origin of Buddhism, about 500 BC. It's arguably one of the most significant scriptural texts ever written. And I've never met anybody who had a problem with it. Christian, Muslim, Jew, Buddhist, everybody reads and goes, oh yeah, I know this one. It's brilliant, it's luminous, it's gorgeous. And this is a product of Chinese culture. Chinese culture is very earth-affirming. This thing called earth, life and death, family, gardening. These are okay things. In fundamental Orthodox Buddhism, no. You're ordained, you do not get to work. You cannot even touch the implements of work. You do not get to have a family. You do not even get to touch a member of the opposite sex. We're not here to do that. Because this is the place we are here to transcend. This ain't the goal. That's the goal. A lot of us know that one, right? Zen comes along and says, oh, no, this is fine. Because of no separation. Do you get it? If there's no place to spit, where do you think you're going? And if you want to leave, that's about you. It's not about this. So if you can't put your hands in that loamy earth when you're gardening and say, this is sacred, and this is God's creation, that's in you. Because this ain't broken. This works just fine. All of its suffering, all of its difficulty, all of its dirt under the nails, the pains of childbirth, the snot in our nose, the heartbreak, the loss, the human experience can be met with the fully divine part of us. This is a fully human, fully divine thing. Is your love too small to meet the darkest places in you? That's what meditation is for. Of course you're greedy. Yeah, we all are. Of course you're hateful. Of course you are. We all are. Of course you miss the mark. Of course you do. We all do. Of course you're scared. Of course. There's a part of you that understands that and is willing to hold that with huge compassion, and transform it. You get to do that yourself. You can do that. So the whole path of early Buddhism gets turned on its head with Zen. Because Zen says, this thing called samsara, the world of missing the mark, the world of ignorance, the world of suffering, this whole path we're on to go to nirvana where we never have to suffer again, that doesn't make any sense. That makes no sense at all. You've just created a separation where there is no separation. And so we teach that samsara, this world, and that world are one thing. One thing. One thing. The implications of that are completely staggering because you've got nowhere to go now. It means no escape. But it also means, oh, this is it. I've arrived. Do you get it? When you're walking a circular path, every step is the first one, every step is the last one. You're never lost. Where are you going? You're not going anywhere. Right? A parent that wants to leave the crying kid, we want the parent that goes, you're just fine. I know you're scared and I'm right here. That's the invitation of Zen. Practice and nirvana or freedom are this. It can only happen in this moment because there are no other moments. It can only happen in this life. There are no other lives. Whether you believe in reincarnation or not, that's not the point. You've got this. And this whole idea that you want to leave this and go somewhere else, that's about you. And there's something in you that's still hurting. Please know what that is. because I promise you there is no place to go. This is it. We see this in our Christian tradition too, the Gnostic Gospels. The kingdom of God is spread out upon the earth, Christ said, but men don't see it. And all of us have that experience. All of us in this room have had that experience. I trust that this is a totally universal human experience, regardless of your faith tradition, where on one day at one time, for whatever reason, you can call it grace, the veil is lifted from your eyes and you look around and everything in the world is just on fire. There's nothing broken ever. There never has been anything broken. And yes, it hurts. But my God, look at it. Do you see that moment when you go, oh, and you're pierced by it? We trust that that's at the core. That is the nature of reality. For just a second, you apprehended clearly. So the path is about, yes, keep staying with that. Polish your lens. Meet all of the dark areas in you with love, with light, with the compassionate consciousness that you already are. Don't look to your practice to escape or get away or calm it down or run. No, 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 no. Your kids are still in that building. I don't care if it's on fire. You got to go back in. You got to go back in. So I think of the path of meditation, I think of the path of Zen as being much more like marriage or parenthood. You know what you're signing up for, and you don't. But you know. Talk to somebody who's been married for 50 years. Oh yeah, I just got better every day, never had a problem. Come on. I've had kids, yeah, you know what you're signing up for. It's very, 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 very challenging, and it breaks your heart. And if you're lucky, your heart breaks. If you're lucky, your heart breaks. Because it's about awareness, because it's about being more alive. That really is what we're doing. So this is our founder at MZMC. Boom, Katagiri Roshi. The important point of spiritual practice is not to try to escape your life, but to face it completely and directly. This is my teacher's teacher, Suzuki Roshi, who wrote Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, that I also highly recommend, regardless of your faith tradition. He started San Francisco Zen Center. Moment after moment, you should completely devote yourself to listening to your inner voice. This is a lovely nun who is in New York State. You'll notice she's wearing a black version of the small robe. She is still in training, is what that means. This is a nun who is meditating. You'll notice the direction that she is facing. So you know exactly what she's looking at. Her. Isn't that courageous? That really moves me. Somebody who says, yeah, I'll look. I'm going to feel what's there. I'm going to let my life come up. Just come up. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to look at it. No more games. That feels like something really beautiful to me. And she sits up straight, just like in our sermon outside. She sits up straight because she's awakeness. She is Buddha. You don't underestimate Buddha. You can feel a tremendous amount. Allow yourself to be upright. You are upright, right? Do you feel the dignity? The dignity of that. That doesn't belong to Buddhism. It's human. She was born with that body, right? And there's Roshi Joan. Some of you know. She's in New Mexico at Upaya. So our Zen Center was first. There are now 3 other Zen centers in the Twin Cities. Clouds and Water is St. Paul. Dharma Field and Compassionate Ocean are both in Minneapolis. If you come to MZMC, you'll see this. He's gone. He died in 1990. But that's still where we give the talks. That's our altar. It used to be the fireplace. Our meditation hall is the living room. We're small. And a lot of folks are combining them both. I don't have time to, and that's not what this is about. This is trying to lead into Susan's presentation next week. But Zen has a saying, there is no God, but he's always with you. So please move it from here down to here. Then you can touch it. All your ideas, they're too small. He's never absent. Do you kind of get the paradox that you're invited into there? We have folks like Thomas Merton, Thich Nhat Hanh, Robert Kennedy. These are Benedictines, and Robert Kennedy is a Jesuit, who have both been formally empowered, just like I have, to be senseis or Zen teachers. So Catholic in both cases, but also fully empowered Zen teachers. So I'll leave you with this. These are the 4 vows of the Bodhisattva. This is the beginning of Zen. It is the end of Zen. This is at the heart of everything. If you were to ask a Zen practitioner, what is your answer to the 4 Noble Truths, we'd say, oh, we got them. And this is just words on a page, so pitch it when you're done. But our response to the nature of reality is to describe what we see of it and then our response to it, which the first is the number of beings are limitless. There's an infinite number of beings. I think we all have a pretty easy time going, yep. There's a lot of beings out there. and I'm going to free every one of them. That completely kicks this out. Your brain has no idea what to do with that. But your heart knows exactly what to do with that. It's what love does. The suffering is infinite. You go, yeah, love doesn't care. It's going to love it anyway, right? Second one is delusions, inexhaustible. Same thing. The ways in which I'm going to get this wrong, I'm really inventive. I promise I'm going to screw this up in ways you can't even fathom. But I'm going to extinguish every one of them. I'm still going to do it. Anything worth doing, anything this important, is worth doing very poorly for a very long time, right? Kind of like parenthood or marriage. Like, yeah, I'm going to make a mess of it, but it's the calling of love, so I'll say yes. The teaching, the Dharma, the possibility of learning from one another, limitless. And my response is, I'm going to get all of it, right? And then finally, you can't attain Buddhism. It's impossible. And you go, yes, I'll become that very thing. This is the spirit of practice in our tradition. Yep, we see the scope of it, and it's beyond all of our comprehension, and we're going to do it anyway. Do you feel the sort of the crazy courage that's behind that? But I don't think this is unique to Buddhism. I think this is the human condition. I think some part of each one of us goes, the ocean is polluted, and I'm gonna fix that. You know you can't. You know the problem is infinite. And some part of you goes, I'm gonna do something anyway. In the face of impossible odds, what does love do? In the face of infinite suffering, what does love do? It says yes. It doesn't shut down, it never does. So the heart of this practice, the heart of Zen, is infinite optimism. In the face of infinite suffering, we say yes to all of it. So, I know we're out of time. I'm grateful, as I was last week, for your attention and your engagement with this stuff. My contact information is on the top page of your handout there. So if you've got questions about any of this stuff, what I do for a living is I'm a spiritual director. Most of my clients, most of my directees are Christian, but I spend a lot of time with people who are asking very deep questions about their faith and about the meaning of life and about suffering and that kind of stuff. So if there's anything I can do for you, either on a personal level, in relationship with WCC, or on a professional level, let me know, because I'm available to you. And I'll turn it over to the powers that be. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Busho. We've got 8 minutes till 8. I say we push it right to 8 and at least hit a few good questions. It's a good chance to ask a friendly Buddhist. So we're going to play the game. Ask the Buddhist. And if it goes past 8 and you got to go, just go, okay? But we're going to use the microphone so that it's on the videotape because we're videoing this whole series. All right? So use your name and then ask a question.
Okay, I was wondering, there's so many things that we study as we're getting older, as all the way along, whatever, and like, I'm thinking of 5 love languages, or, many different things like that, and what's your sign, and all this other kind of stuff, and, I don't see that. I don't see that happening, and I also don't understand how I can be like the type of person I am, but not be. I guess that's just boggles my mind. I can't understand that at all.
It sounds like you're asking about the teaching of emptiness, the non-separation piece.
Right, I think so. I never know what I'm saying, but it's.
I like you. You're going to fit in just fine. To your first sort of implied question there, one of the great running jokes, I assume this goes back all the way, one of the great running jokes in Buddhism is how fond this tradition is of lists. My God, there are lists and lists and lists, and the Four Noble Truths, and the Eightfold Path, and the 16 Dhatus, and the 4 Vows, and the da-da-da, and the da-da. There are actually books that are just lists, believe it or not. So we're very, very, very fond of lists. I was trying to be as merciful as I could tonight by giving you very, very few. So I've read stuff like the love languages and the 4 agreements and the da-da-da. So we're very, very fond of those things. I downplayed them tonight because, again, at the core of Zen is always, you use the lists to get beyond the lists. To your second point, emptiness is extremely difficult to understand. I actually think experientially, we know it more intuitively than we think we do. And I think when we move that teaching up into here is when we get confused. Because I think we actually know that we are not one, meaning when I do this, you can't feel it. Okay, we must be separate. That's true, 100% true. But we also know, and we usually get this experience through people that we love, because our sense of separation, I think it's fair to say, around people that we love is less. We're more identified with them. Does that make sense? And so when somebody that we love comes home from a long day of work and your chest gets heavy, and your eyes start to dilate, and your blood pressure goes up, and they haven't even opened their mouth yet. Are you the same person? No. But how separate are you exactly? And you didn't choose that. It didn't go through this door. It didn't go through the door of, all right, I'm practicing Buddhism this month. And they have that whole thing about non-separation, so maybe I should feel what my wife is feeling. You don't choose it. It happens organically. We feel one another. We feel their joy, too. You'll never guess what happened. You're like, I don't know, what? You're already dancing. You don't even know what it is. Of course, you're separate, but you're not. So the metaphor we use is waves on a lake. Yep, if you sit and watch them, splash, splash, splash. Yep, they're separate. And then you step back and go, that's one lake laking. Right? And those are both true. Sure, separate waves, but come on. I mean, it's a lake. That's what lakes do. This is what consciousness does. It does Busho, and it does John, and it does Rustin. Isn't that funny? I'm going to go home and do a different house from there. They're separate waves, but this is God-godding. Separate, not separate. Separate, not separate. And I think this organ has no problem with that. I think it's this organ that goes, oh man, it's got to be one of those two. You're making me crazy. Does that sort of make sense? Maybe I'm making it worse. I'm trying. It's such a hard teaching.
Hi, my name is Linda, and
Linda.
I would like to know what you do when you sit and look at the wall and you say you meditate.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What are you doing? Are you praying? No.
What
or
a great question.
okay.
What a great question. We'll go back. What we're doing, there's way, way, way more to say, but in the interest of tonight, I'll say, see the fourth bullet point there with 1, 2, 3? That's what we're doing. That'll be my answer tonight. I don't know. I'm going to start by paying really close attention to my posture. Notice my breath, my knees against the floor, my contact with the earth. Feel the dynamism of the breath. The changing, unfolding of experience helps me settle, helps me return to this moment, right? And then I try to let go of my ideas about it. I'm breathing, sitting at the Zen Center. Yeah, okay, cool. It's bigger than that. Let your attention be bare. Let go of your narratives around it. And then finally, anything that arises, can you meet it with love? And that's where the challenging part is, I think, to love whatever's there. Because oftentimes what's there is busy mind. That's fine. Well, your mind's busy. Okay. A lot of anger today. Oh, yeah. Does that make sense? Like, what transforms anger? Love, not judgment. So what we don't do is go, this is the state I'm trying to attain, and anything that is not that state, out. Like you're a bouncer for your consciousness. Right? And it's like, no, that doesn't make sense. If you're angry, there's obviously pain there showing itself to you. Why are you kicking it out? Does that make sense? So I'm way oversimplifying, but I'm also kind of not. It actually is that simple. It's like, well, what's happening right now? What are you noticing about your body, about your emotions? Are you present to it? Can you love it? That's all. I actually think it is that simple. Thank you. What a lovely question. Yeah. Please.
Hi, my name is Reed. Thank you very much for being here. We're privileged to have you.
Oh, you're welcome.
There is a place for suffering, obviously. Is there a place for joy?
Oh, for sure. Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. The reason I love that question is because when people say the core of Buddhism is the Four Noble Truths, and the very first one is the universality of suffering, right away we go, wow, Buddhism. I'm just going to put this over here in the category of bummers. Along with like sick puppies and, running out of Chex Mix, things on that scale. we kind of have that rep of like, oh, you guys are such a drag, which I get. Zen especially, is that fair to say? I'll say it. I think Zen especially puts a premium on joy. But here's where the difficulty comes. Joy is love. Joy is very, very big. I'm differentiating between joy and happy, amused, distracted. Okay, yeah. I mean, like, oh, I'm watching Stranger Things. That's awesome. Cool. I wouldn't call it joy, probably, right? And all of us have probably had the experience of having our joy be big enough that it also contained discomfort. Remember the family reunion, Grandma and Grandpa were still there, and everybody was together, and I had such a sense of joy. And also, it was really, really hot, and there were mosquitoes. And the really hot and the mosquitoes didn't get in the way, they were included. Does that make sense? So when our back hurts during meditation, it's like, oh, your joy can include that. So the only reason I'm emphasizing this is because it's entirely about joy, which is why I love your question. And where do we get to it? We get to it by looking at the thing that isn't joy when it shows up and going, oh, you're included. We tend to think of joy and suffering as on a pole of opposites. And that's where we go wrong, because obviously we want this, and we don't want this. And so all of our life is trying to do this. Do you see it? So back to our crying baby metaphor, the solution to crying baby in this case is leave the house. Go to some place where it's calm. But you sort of get it, right? No, joy is actually holding the baby. Because she needs to be held, and you need to hold her, and that's what joy looks like now. So absolutely, people's hearts are lightened, their experience of being alive is more vivid. Yes, our minds get quiet, our hearts get open through meditation. That's true. All that stuff you've read is true. It probably improves your golf game too, I don't know, right? It is fundamentally a joyous practice, but the starting point is you are already joy. That's the nature of your awareness. It's what you are. It's love. It's what the universe is made of. So you don't need to look for it any more than a lamp needs to look for light. It is that. What we spend our time looking at when it shows up is, oh, the little constrictions. And when that little constriction shows up and you meet it with joy, you're honoring what you really are. Do you get it? I'm the agent. I'm the thing that goes, oh yeah. Do you feel it? Isn't that cool? So I'm honestly appreciating very much your question. We talk so much about suffering that after all it's like, come on, you guys. But it isn't like if you had a presentation tonight from a doctor, all they're going to talk about is all the stuff that goes wrong. And it's a little bit like that. Like we talk about the stuff that gets in the way because we understand that health is the natural state. You know, joy is the natural state. Connection is the natural state. Love, compassion, wisdom. These are seen in Buddhism as being fundamental to consciousness itself. You don't have to learn them. You need to unlearn what gets in the way of them. You already got them. Right? So I hope I'm helping and not confusing you further. Yeah.
One more. You good? One more. I said 8 o'clock, but I know full well it's 9. I'm just having so much fun. The time is flying by. We'll give Andy the last question, but Busho's not going to run out of here. So if you want to talk some more with him.
They locked the doors last week and they wouldn't let me.
Thank you so much, John. And thank you so much for this great talk.
Sure thing.
And I'm reflecting on my own experience. And that experience tells me, how do I know myself except in relation to others? And how do I come to recognize that it's not about me, but it's about the larger community? How do I come to deal with this issue that love is found out there, giving to a larger community that's bigger than myself, rather than indulging in my own navel gazing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Great question. Did that make sense to folks? Yeah. Good question. Yeah. Very good question. Again, try to be short here. You can tell that's hard for me, you guys. This is hard for me because each thing is connected to each other thing. So at first, especially with that photo, right? Somebody sitting and facing the wall. Talk about navel gazing, right? It'd be pretty easy to go, now there's somebody who's taking care of only one person in the world. Talk about selfish. How come she's not out there in a soup kitchen or Clothing, what's with all this, right? What a great question. The only place I can really take that tonight is, and it'll tie in with your question, our nature is connection. It is, right? Because we're not separate. Sure, we're separate, but we're not. The basis of Buddhism is this idea that when Nan shows up and her heart is broken, I will naturally go, Nan. Right? Because I understand exactly how she feels. I don't have her experience because she is separate. She's sad about her cat, Fluffy, who died, right? But she is showing me sadness. And even though Busho isn't Nan, Busho knows sad. So if I feel connected to her in that moment, and there's no distance between us, that's just me acting in accord with the way things already are. Oh, Nan, right? We all know this feeling. It arises naturally. So scenario B is, Nan comes to me and says, I had to put my cat down. And I miss her like crazy. I can't stop thinking about her. Oh, you should get another cat. Do you feel what I've just done there? I've given advice. Well, that's fine. Advice is fine. What did I actually just do? I started feeling it, and I don't want to feel it. I can't be with it. Who is that about? Where's the barrier between me and Nan? If I really want to be a loving presence to her, an actual loving presence, meaning no criticism, no judgment, no advice, no power moves, nothing, but just to see her, go, yeah, me too. I refuse to see you as broken. I see you as pain, just like me. Do you feel it? Now something's possible. There's connection. And the only thing that can possibly get in the way of that kind of connection is here. So the funny, weird, inverted truth is, at the core of Buddhism, you saw those four vows at the very end. The entire thing is about service to the universe, going, my God, they're all suffering. I have to be there. I have to do something. I have to do something because they're me. It's like when Harriet Tubman escapes slavery and she makes it to the Mason-Dixon line. That should be the end of the story, you guys, and it's not. It's the frickin' beginning of the story because she kind of figures out, oh my God, it's possible. Now the work begins because it's not done. I'm still down there. Does that make sense? The entire thing. But she had to go alone by herself to figure out where the limits were before she could do anything for anybody else. And so if there's a space between me and Nan, that's about me. And so in Zen, that woman facing that wall is the bravest offering she can possibly make. One human being looking at the movement of one human heart and going, I will love everything that shows up here because I know this is attached and connected to every other thing that has ever been. And if I can't love something out there, it's because of me. So I spend a lot of time going, where are those flutterings down here? Where are the spaces that get constricted, right? Where are the blind spots? Where's the pain? I'll go in after you. I'll see you, right? That's what makes me available to Nan later, or the soup kitchen, or my neighbors, my friends, my Sangha, we would say Sangha, but community, parish, right? That's the only thing that can ever come between us is this. So we spend so much time on this. And again, from the outside, I kind of look selfish. Jeez, you guys. But I've explained to you the nature of that inquiry. It's not about, good luck with your whole wars, famine thing, okay? I'm going to go over here to my happy place. Don't wake me. That is not Zen. Ever. 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 Never escape. Because this is it. There's literally no place to go. And since we're all in this together, I better do my work. If I'm really going to be of help to you, I better do my work. Or else I'm going to think I'm helping Nan by saying, get another cat. I just helped her. Do you feel it? That's not me being evil. It's just me missing the mark, man. Because I didn't know I didn't want to be with my own pain. My capacity for my own pain was so small that I shut her out. And I hurt her and I didn't mean to. But if I've spent enough time with my own sick cat, my own pain, then it becomes okay. And I let my heart break for her because it's okay. Everybody in the room lets their heart break for people that they love all the time. We don't see that as a problem. It's okay. It's part of how our love shows up. That's part of how we serve others, right? To let ourselves hurt with them. We call it compassion. Am I helping? This is me giving a short answer, you guys. Can you imagine if Rustin and John weren't here? My God,
We have lock-ins, right? We could have a lock-in, and everybody could just keep asking questions. We do this
I'm
with
gonna
high.
give a long answer, you guys.
We do it with high schoolers. We could do it with adults, right? Thank you again, Bouchelon. Can we give him an
yeah.
applause? Super grateful for your wisdom and your desire and willingness to share with us this tradition and pieces of this tradition, knowing that, as he said the very first time, that this is a fragment of a very large tradition, and we all have work to do, right? Because the part of this is about deepening our understanding of our other brothers and sisters within this world so that we can connect in new and profound ways. So go do your work as people from this place and come back next week for Susan Stabil, who is the writer of Growing in Love and Wisdom, Tibetan Buddhist Sources for Christian Meditation. So join us for that. She's going to talk about the intersection between our faith and Buddhism. But go in peace and have a safe journey.